What's up, everybody? On and on we go on this amazing journey. And this one, I have to thank all of my friends on YouTube who came to my last couple live streams for this recommendation of somebody to interview on the channel. Well, of course, before I interview him, I have to know who he is. And this is Paul Anthony Wallis. And he's an author and a researcher, and he's done a lot of great work regarding biblical texts and all sorts of different concepts contained therein. In fact, this video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be exploring a little excerpt that I found on Paul Anthony Wallis, or from Paul Anthony Wallis's YouTube channel, where he talks about the concept of hell. Now, this isn't something that I've talked about for a while, but it just blew me away because he gives an argument for why the idea, notion of an eternal hell is absurd in the exact same way that I gave it. And look, maybe it's not that novel, but it just really blew me away when I was watching the clip. I'm like, oh my God, this is exactly what I said in my videos prior to seeing any of his work. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I thought we could kind of jump back and revisit that in a way to explore who Paul Anthony Wallis is. And I'm sure there's so much more material out there that he has presented beyond just simply the concept of hell and trying to basically say that it's absurd, not something that we should introduce into any sort of dogma. But we'll get to that, hopefully, that information at another point. So this will be a quick introduction, but really focusing on this idea of why hell is absurd. So before we get into the mix, who is Paul Anthony Wallis? He is a researcher, speaker, and internationally best-selling author, best known for his Eden series. And I think this is the famous one, Escaping from Eden, which I haven't read yet. The Scars of Eden, Echoes of Eden, The Eden Conspiracy, The Invasion of Eden, and The Eden Enigma. A former church archdeacon, Wallis brings a background, and he studied theology in school. Wallis brings a background in theology, ministry training, spirituality, and ancient textual interpretation to his work, which explores whether humanity's oldest religion and mythological traditions may preserve memories of contact with non-human intelligences. Born in Buckinghamshire, England, and later settling in Australia, he has spent decades studying world mythologies, biblical narratives, mysticism, and ancient civilizations, often challenging conventional readings of scripture by asking whether gods, angels, and sky beings in ancient texts may have been misunderstood by later religious traditions. I saw another interview, which I didn't include in this video, but it was on Gaia TV, where he talks about the individuals, the ancient scriptures and engravings found at, I think it's called Göbekli Tepe, where there was a superstructure found, I think, that was talked about by Graham Hancock. But he talks about a lot of their ancient texts and going back and investigating them again and trying to interpret the language again and saying, no, it's a misinterpretation of gods. They were really talking about advanced entities or beings that were helping them out and that were cohabitating with them. Anyway, so just an aside, this guy is more than just simply a biblical scholar. He is looking at all forms and all walks of ancient texts and trying to go in with a fine-tooth comb to really get to the heart of what they were saying, to try and uncover different truths, different realities that could help us understand who we are and why we're here. So very cool. And from what I've seen so far, man, I really like this guy. He just seems to be very intelligent, very careful with his words, very careful with his research. So I can only say good things. And without further ado, let's get into the mix here. Let's get into his thoughts on the idea of hell. Now, if you're new to the channel and you're still worried about hell being real, if this is still a pain point or a fear for you, hopefully this will give you some comfort. Again, this is something that I think I even came to this conclusion when I was a kid, but really more firmly, I'd say as an adult. But I even thought about this as a child, thinking, how absurd is it to, but this goes into the entire paradigm of, forget about infinite existence and reincarnation. If you think just there's one life to live, like in modern Christianity, Islam, a lot of mainstream religions, and then you can get a eternal torment for messing up a finite amount of time, which effectively amounts to zero. It feels really, really bizarre. It just feels completely illogical. And that's the conclusion that I had a long time ago, but it's so cool because he brings that up in this whole discussion. So anyways, without further ado, let's get into the mix of what is the traditional view of hell first and foremost.
Now, traditionally, the church has taught that hell is a place of eternal conscious torment for the non-believer. Should we be worried, or is that really a dogma that's been built on sand?
Okay, so that's the little example, right? Obviously, that's what we know. Eternal torment for non-believers, maybe also for potentially committing the wrong type of sins. Although overall, it seems that you can be saved at any moment. I believe in Christianity, it's kind of like you can have those deathbed come to Jesus moments and then be saved. So I guess it's really all about that ultimately. But anyways, there it is. Eternal torment for whatever your transgressions may be, eternal torment. Okay, now here is his statement on how this idea of hell was distorted in the first place.
Question of hell. And we're going to find that through wrong translation and misuse of the New Testament, the church has in fact produced something that is a distortion of what's in the Bible itself.
Okay, so there it is, mistranslations. Now he's going to go deeper. Now, the first part of this idea where he's talking about why hell sounds unjust, yes, I mean, he's going to go into the mistranslations, but here he takes this pure logic argument. This is exactly what I'm not trying to sit here and pat myself on the back, but I am a little happy that he's saying it exactly the way that I said it, because I never heard anybody say it exactly this way. But he talks about the mathematical argument, the mathematical absurdity of applying an infinite punishment for a finite lifespan, even if it was 1,000,000 years of terrible behavior. You understand? I think people don't understand, they don't realize, they don't recognize what infinity means, what forever means, in contrast to 1,000,000,000,000 years. It's trillion is nothing. If you remember in calculus and limits, the limit as any number divided by infinity goes to zero. Okay, that's the point. Because in comparison to infinity, 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000, 1,000,000,000,000, a zillion, in a measly 100 years, all of that is meaningless. All of that is nothing. So the imbalance is obvious from a mathematical perspective. And right off the bat, this idea, this notion of eternal torment for a singular finite life, or even multiple lives, but either way, it's completely absurd. But he echoes these exact same sentiments.
In Darrell's theology, the punishment for not becoming a Christian would be that after your death, God would resurrect you, body, spirit, and soul, and then set you on fire. Only the agony of being on fire would continue for eternity. This is the classic hellfire teaching of Orthodox Christianity. I had a problem with this on two counts. Firstly, it is so obviously cruel and unjust. To mete out an infinite punishment for a finite crime is mathematically absurd. The idea that I had a problem with this because I was somehow more compassionate than God was equally absurd. So something in this overall picture had to be off. My second problem was that it is not the teaching of the Bible.
Not the teaching of the Bible. It's talking about like the teachings of Jesus Christ. Okay, now in this next clip, he's going to get into exactly why this mistake was made, where this mistake comes from in terms of the literature. And he dives into the literature to kind of unpack this issue. Now, again, for me at this point where I'm at right now, it's not like I'm hanging on the words of the Bible or any particular religious text in its entirety. Like, so it's not as though I'm saying this is a huge revelation, but just as an introduction to this gentleman who's providing all this great information, Paul Wallis, I just thought it was a great way to showcase some of the work that he's done, some of the research. But yeah, this is more of an exploration of his great thinking, as well as if there are people out there that do have this as a pain point, that are concerned about this notion of hell, and maybe you're still clinging to the traditional view of Christianity, at least from this stance. Where I'm not saying you have to divorce yourself from everything. I mean, you do you, obviously, but I think this is going to be maybe something to lighten your load if this is something that's been stressing you out.
In Darrell's theology, the punishment for not becoming a Christian would be that after you would...
Hold on. Let me go to the next clip. Where did I put it in? There we go. Here we go. Check this out.
I quickly saw that Jesus' warnings about ultimate consequences actually have to do with a place called Gehenna. Gehenna was the trash heap just beyond the city walls of Jerusalem. Clearly, Jesus was speaking figuratively. He was not literally warning people about the municipal trash heap. Rather, Jesus was warning his hearers about selfish, destructive, and self-destructive behaviors which have the potential to unravel and ruin your life and land you on the trash heap of life, full of regret and remorse.
Okay, so he's not the only person, right, to bring up this idea of.
As I continued my fine-toothed journey through...
Sorry about that. He's not the only person to bring up this idea of Gehenna being the mistranslation here, mistranslating Gehenna into hell. This was also talked about. I actually have a video, but I'm blanking on the gentleman's name. This was also talked about on the Next Level Soul podcast. There's another gentleman who was I think a former pastor or priest, and he since has left the church, but he also talks about the same mistranslation. So all this whole idea, the burning, all the stuff, it's because they used to burn the trash in the village. And that's where this whole idea of hell came about. So anyways, I just thought this was super cool on two fronts. This is somebody, Paul Wallis, that people had mentioned to me in my live stream that I go check out. I go and I check them out, and it's, that we see the intersections and things that I previously covered. Number one, I guess my own just natural thoughts about this mathematical absurdity. And he says that verbatim, and I love that. And number two, it coincides with another gentleman that was on Next Level Soul podcast that I talked about, where it's like, oh my God, it's a mistranslation. Hell is probably just this whole fantastical concept that came out of a mistranslation and something that was never even really said. Now, why did it exist and linger for so long? Probably because it's a nice incentive structure, and probably because it serves a great purpose. So, hey, it was a mistake that turned into something useful, and then it was pushed and used, I imagine, as a big stick, right? When you have the whole carrot and stick dichotomy, this was the stick to keep people in line, to keep people connected to the particular faith, for fear of this like horrendous, awful punishment, which I think most people can't even really wrap their heads around. Like we can't wrap our heads around infinity. It's not really possible. But the best way I think you can think about it is, take 1 billion, trillion, million years, and it's nothing compared to infinity. There you go. That's the best way to think about it. So any other punishment you can imagine for whatever duration, it's all zero in comparison and contrast to infinity. All right, so there it is. There is my introduction to Paul Wallis. Really, really cool video. Again, just shows a couple of short excerpts. I'm going to dive in more deeply into his work, and I would love to reach out to him. I'd love to have a conversation with him. Of course, before that, I need to start reading some of his books and getting more familiar with his content. But very, very cool. Happy that this was recommended to me. Very happy to learn about him. And I'm sure he's got a lot of information and answers regarding this crazy, crazy puzzle we're trying to unravel, or put together, I should say. Why are we here? What is the purpose of life? And it may be the purpose of existence is a better way to put it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for joining. We'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.